The north is cold and full of whispers.
Before we dive in, check the link in the description if you want exclusive timelines, members-only videos you won't find on YouTube, all on our Patreon. The Red Mountains of Dorne do not care about history. They were old before the first men crossed the arm of the world, and they will be standing long after whatever kingdoms rise and fall in their shadow. They are black stone and white bone, and on the night of 283 AC, they are lit by a single torch and the sound of steel. 3 of Ned Stark's 7 men are already dead by the time your eyes adjust to the dark. They aren't fallen cleanly, the way songs later describe it. One is face down in the sand, with his arms underneath him at a wrong angle. One has made it 8 steps toward the tower door before his legs stopped working. The third has folded at the base of the mountain path, where the first blow found him, and he hasn't moved since. They are not sleeping. They are not at peace. They are simply finished, in the blunt, total way that violence finishes people when it is practiced at the highest level. 4 remain, Ned Stark among them, Howland Reed at his left, 2 more men whose names history will not bother to record. Gerald Hightower, the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, 50 years of service and the reputation to match, is still on his feet, but not for long. A sword comes out of the dark at a wild angle, more desperation than skill, and Hightower catches it badly, wrong-footed on the desert stone. He goes down hard. He does not get up. Oswell Went is the last Kingsguard standing. He is already bleeding from 2 wounds, and he makes the decision that bards will call honorable and survivors will remember differently. He takes 2 of Ned's remaining men with him when he goes. Not elegantly, not in the manner of songs. 2 men who had names and families and plans for after the war, and then suddenly they didn't. And then there is only one. Arthur Dayne. He stands in the torchlight with 2 blades, dawn in his right hand, pale as bone, and catching the fire in a way that polished steel simply does not. Something almost alive in the shimmer of it, and a Dornish short sword in his left. He is breathing hard, but it is the breathing of controlled exertion, not exhaustion. He has not been cut once, not once, across an engagement that has lasted long enough to kill 6 men. He is 36 years old. He is the finest knight who has ever lived, and in this moment, standing in the sand of the Red Mountains with 6 men's worth of blood cooling around him, that fact is not an abstraction. There are 2 of Ned's men left, Ned himself, Howland Reed. Arthur Dayne looks at Eddard Stark across the gap between them and says nothing. He doesn't need to. The arithmetic is plain. He is going to win. Then Howland Reed moves. The Crannog man is small. He has always been small. Small enough to move without the kind of footfall that larger men produce, small enough to circle wide in the dark beyond the torch's reach. He is behind Dayne before Dayne knows it. The blade catches the torchlight for a fraction of a second as it comes forward, and then it connects. A thrust aimed at the space between shoulder blade and spine, aimed to stop the man, not to kill him. 3 inches. That is the margin. 3 inches separate the blade's path from Arthur Dayne's spine, from his lung, from death. Howland Reed is not an executioner. He aimed to end the fight, not the man, and the difference was 3 inches. Dayne stumbles, falls to one knee. The Dornish short sword drops into the sand. Halt. Ned Stark's voice. It stops everything. Ned climbs the tower steps alone. He counts them later when he is trying to remember if any of this was real. 23 steps of rough-cut desert stone, climbing in a spiral so tight his shoulder brushes the outer wall on every turn. A torch bracket near the top, empty. He climbs the last dozen steps in near darkness, and then there is light from under a door, warm and guttering, and behind that door a sound that stops his blood. A newborn's cry, thin, insistent, alive. He opens the door. The sheets are red, not stained. Red. The word blood does not carry the right weight for what he finds. Blood is what a man loses from a cut, from something survivable. This is something else. This is the color of a thing being ended. Lyanna Stark is propped against the headboard by someone's effort, someone who understood that she could not breathe flat. She is 16 years old. She looks far older. Her dark hair is plastered across her face, and her eyes, when they find Ned, are the gray of their family and brighter than they have any right to be, brighter than a body this damaged should be able to produce. She is holding a child, a boy, still red-wrinkled from the world's arrival, dark-haired, gray-eyed, his face crumpled in protest at air and light and cold. Alive, emphatically alive. Ned. Her voice is quieter than it should be, smaller than Lyanna's voice has any right to be. He is at her side in 3 steps. He takes her hand. Her grip is surprising. There is still strength in it. The grip of a woman who is fighting, still fighting for every additional minute. She doesn't explain. She doesn't have the time for that. And she has spent however many days in this tower understanding that the explanation is beside the point. She looks at him with the focused urgency of a person who has one thing left to do and intends to do it. "Promise me, Ned." Her other hand tightens on the child, then lifts him toward her brother. "Promise me." Ned looks at the boy's face. He sees Lyanna in it. He sees their father in the set of the jaw. He sees what Robert Baratheon will see, if he is ever allowed to see it. A ghost of the woman he loved, wearing the shape of the man he hates. And Ned knows in that moment with total certainty what Robert will do. He knows what the mountain did to the other children of Rhaegar. He takes the child into his arms. "I promise." She dies before dawn, without drama, without the last words that bards would later invent for her. She dies the way most people die. Slowly, then all at once, the grip loosening, the brightness behind the gray eyes going somewhere else. Ned sits with her until the sky through the tower window turns from black to purple. Then he carries the child back down the 23 steps. Arthur Dayne is on one knee in the sand, Howland Reed's sword at his neck. When Ned emerges from the tower base, he is bleeding through his shirt, dark spreading stain across the left side. But he is upright. His eyes are open. Dawn is 4 feet away in the sand, and he is not looking at it. He is looking at the child in Ned Stark's arms. Something moves across his face. Not relief. Something older than relief. Ned stops a few feet away. 2 men look at each other across the bodies of their respective dead. They have every reason in the world to remain enemies. The war between them has a formal shape, a political logic, a narrative in which one of them is right and one of them is wrong. But across that gap, across the sand and the blood and the dead, there is a shared fact neither of them can deny. Both of them loved Rhaegar Targaryen, not as a king, as a man. Both of them see in the dark-haired child this woman died to deliver, something they cannot simply walk away from. The conversation takes less than 3 minutes. Arthur Dayne is dead. That is what Ned Stark will tell the world. He will describe it precisely as history will record it. The Tower of Joy, the last 3 Kingsguard, the fight, the conclusion. He will give nothing false except the ending. Howland Reed, when Ned turns to look at him, meets his gaze and nods once. The Crannog man is not a man who does things by half measures. He is in, or he is out. He has always been in. The child is placed in Dayne's arms. Dawn is wrapped in oilcloth and strapped to his back. A Dayne household man, one of 3 who were never part of the fight, who have been watching from the mountain road, who Arthur trusted with his life, before this night, steps forward from the dark. They leave Ned enough blood, enough physical truth, that what he describes will match the scene anyone else later sees. Arthur Dayne lies in the sand beside Oswell Went's body. His wound is real. The blood is real. Ned mounts, rides north. Behind him, in the first gray minutes before actual dawn, Arthur Dayne opens his eyes, gets to his feet, adjusts the child against his chest, begins walking east into the Dornish mountains, away from the tower, away from the history that is already calcifying behind him into a shape that has nothing to do with the truth. The Battle of the Trident happens weeks before any of this, and history records it without mercy. Prince Rhaegar Targaryen dies in the Ruby Ford with Robert Baratheon's warhammer through his chest, rubies scattering from his shattered breastplate into the running red water, catching the light as they go under. The future he imagined goes with him. The war ends there, even if nobody tells the fighting yet. Barristan Selmy is pulled from the ford badly wounded. Robert's men, recognizing what they've caught, keep him alive and carry him to where the king sits his horse in the bloody shallows. Robert looks at him for a long time. He is drunk on victory, and he has the decency or the sentimentality to offer what he offers. The white cloak. Keep it. I have no quarrel with men who fight with honor. Barristan Selmy, bleeding from 3 wounds, his body not fully his own yet, reaches for it. He begins the ride toward King's Landing 10 days later, still healing, moving slowly. He is one of perhaps 12 men in the 7 kingdoms whose face every lord, every knight, every common soldier recognizes without introduction. The road is generous with deference. Nobody stops him. Nobody searches him. The rider intercepts him on a mountain road south of the Stormlands, alone, not moving to threaten. One of the Dayne household. Barristan will understand that later, when understanding becomes possible. The rider carries a scroll. No seal, no sigil, no name. Just a line of text in handwriting that Barristan Selmy recognizes immediately, because he has spent 30 years learning to recognize the details that matter. He reads it once. His face does nothing that a stranger would notice. He is a man trained from boyhood to hold his expression against every kind of blow. He reads it again. Then he turns his horse, not north toward King's Landing, toward the pardon and the white cloak and the new King's service, south. The horse moves south at a pace that suggests a destination rather than a retreat, and Barristan Selmy does not look back at the road he is leaving. The child is 4 days old when Arthur Dayne reaches the Dornish coast. The ship is where it was supposed to be, a deep-water cog flying Tyroshi merchant colors, crewed by men who have worked for the Dayne family for long enough that discretion is a professional habit. The harbor is a small one, private, the kind that has no name on any map that merchants use. The sky above it is not yet morning, caught in that particular blue between dark and light that has no clean description. Arthur Dayne stands at the water's edge, the infant bundled against his chest inside his cloak, the warmth of the child against the cold air of the coast, doing something to his chest that he does not have the capacity to examine right now. He looks down at the boy's face, dark hair, gray eyes, already the eyes that the Starks seem to stamp on everyone they love. He has his mother's mouth. He has, and this, Arthur will not say aloud, not for many years, he has something in the shape of his father's forehead. The particular width between the brows that meant Rhaegar was thinking, was already somewhere else, was already seeing something 3 steps ahead of everyone around him. "You look like your mother, Your Grace," Arthur Dayne says, quietly. He has not called anyone that in 3 years. He did not know if he would ever say it again. He steps aboard. The cog moves away from the Dornish coast in the first gray light, and the tower in the Red Mountains, the tower where this all turned, where history recorded a lie, where a woman died and a promise was made and a dead man picked up a baby and walked east, grows smaller behind them, becomes a smudge, becomes a suggestion, becomes nothing. The sun comes up over the eastern sea. Arthur Dayne stands at the bow with his king, who is 4 days old and entirely unaware of what he is, and watches the light come. A walled estate, western promontory, Tyrosh, 299 AC. Tyrosh smells like salt, and something older, a dye process that has been running in the harbor district for 200 years, worked into the stone of the buildings so thoroughly that the locals no longer notice it. The city starts its arguments before dawn and commits to them through midday. Gold and purple banners hang from merchant towers that lean slightly toward each other over the narrow streets, as if conducting a conversation the city has been having with itself for centuries. The estate on the western promontory has learned to exist at the edge of that noise. 3 walls of pale stone, a courtyard of packed earth, a small harbor cut into the cliff face below. The 4th side of the estate is 60 feet of open air, and then the narrow sea. Arthur Dayne built it this way on purpose. Nothing approaches from the water without being seen from 400 yards. The estate is not humble. It is a wealthy exile's house, and the gold that built it came from Dayne accounts that were quietly redirected from Starfall before anyone had cause to ask. But it is spare, in the way that men who have stripped everything down to what is necessary tend to live. There are weapons on the walls and books on the shelves, and very little else. A kitchen, a map room, a training yard on the seaward side, open to the wind. The session has been going for 40 minutes. Jon Snow is 17 years old, lean, dark, coiled in the way of someone who has never carried a pound of weight that wasn't working. He stands in the center of the training yard, barefoot. Dayne's rule, from the beginning: learn the ground before you learn the blade. With a practice sword in his right hand and a Dornish short blade in his left, both of which are getting a considerable amount of use. Barristan Selmy comes from the east side of the yard. He is 59 years old, moving like a man half that age, and he brings his blade in low on the 2nd step, an approach designed not to hit, but to find. He is looking for the rhythm Jon is working in, the heartbeat of the footwork. Every fighter has won. Find it, predict it, and the fight is already decided. Jon has no rhythm to find. He changes it after every 3 exchanges. He has done this since he was 12 years old, when Dayne drilled it into him over 6 months of sessions that left his hands bleeding. Never let them map you. Change your weight. Change your pace. Give them something to read and immediately make it wrong. At 17, after 5 years of drilling, it is simply how he moves. There is no conscious decision. It is reflex dressed as intelligence. Barristan's blade finds nothing and commits to nothing, and in that half-second of recalibration Jon shifts left, just slightly, and Arthur Dayne is already there. Dayne comes from the blind angle with both blades moving. Dawn is practice-dulled for the session, wrapped in leather along the edge, but it is still 5 pounds of star-forged metal moving with a speed that has no right to exist in a 52-year-old man's wrist. The Dornish short blade in his left comes in under the right's trajectory. A low redirect aimed at Jon's leading knee. Jon does not evade outward. He steps in, directly into Dayne, closes the distance to the point where the short blade has no room to complete its arc, where Dayne's longer weapon becomes a liability instead of an advantage, where the geometry of the attack collapses on itself. He drives his left elbow up into the space where Dayne's shoulder is completing the turn, and uses Barristan's approaching press from behind as counterbalance, pivoting off it rather than fighting it, a move that uses one master's momentum against the others. It does not work cleanly. It almost never works cleanly. Dayne adjusts before the pivot is complete, and Barristan, reading the intention before it finishes, is already changing the angle. Jon catches Dayne's practice blade on his crossguard and takes Barristan's across the ribs, not hard, not with intent to bruise. A touch in the precise vocabulary of the session. He is still standing. He has not yielded. Stop. Barristan's voice, not loud. It doesn't need to be. Jon steps back, lowers both blades. He is breathing harder than he would like. His ribs are going to feel that touch tomorrow, but he is not winded. Dayne is watching him with the particular expression that is the closest thing he has to open approval. Barristan is watching him with something else. "You weren't trying to win the session," Barristan says. It is not an accusation. It is an observation delivered with the precision of a man who has spent 40 years reading fighters and has learned to read what lives behind the sword as well as in it. Jon meets his gaze. "No. What were you trying to do? Understand where Arthur would be if this were real. Not practice. If both of you wanted me dead and had somewhere to be afterward." A silence. Barristan looks at Dayne. Dayne looks at the sea. "Good," Dayne says finally. "This is, from Arthur Dayne, high praise." They sit after, the three of them, in the shade of the eastern wall where a stone bench runs the length of the yard. Water, bread, the Tyroshi morning doing what Tyroshi mornings do, which is get loud and golden and smell of the sea. Jon eats without ceremony. He has his father's appetite, which is to say he eats enough and no more, because Dayne instituted the principle 13 years ago, and it stuck. "You dropped your left shoulder on the pivot," Dayne says, without preface. "I know, the adjustment was late. It was late because you were thinking about Selmy's angle instead of holding your own structure. You can think about two things. You cannot hold a third." "I know," Jon says again. Dayne nods once. The correction is filed. It will appear in a session within the week, and Jon will fix it, and the conversation will not need to happen a third time. Barristan pours water from a clay jug, unhurried. "You're High Valyrian," he says, shifting registers entirely. "The Dragon Lords did not conquer the world. They borrowed it, and their heirs have spent 3 centuries forgetting to give it back. The last clause, your rhythm was off. The stress falls on heirs, not forgetting." Yes, say it again. Jon says it again, in High Valyrian, the liquid syllables of a dead empire sitting naturally in his mouth after 13 years of instruction. He says it correctly. Barristan nods. The Tyroshi merchants in the harbor use a debased form. You'll recognize it by the dropped aspirants. Don't correct them. Listen to it. A man who knows 3 languages and speaks them all without accent is a man who has been somewhere expensive. I know. You say that a great deal. I'm usually telling the truth. Jon tears a piece of bread. "Robb Stark," he says, unprompted. "You mentioned him at the map last night. He'd be, what, 18 now?" Barristan sets down the jug. "Nearly. Why?" "I'm trying to understand him. He's had everything I haven't, and I'm not sure which of us has been better prepared by it." He says this without bitterness. It is a genuine question, asked with the analytical detachment of someone doing an honest inventory. He's been raised as an heir. He's practiced command his whole life. He has the loyalty of men who've known him since birth. He'll have the North's instinct in his blood. "And what do you have?" Barristan asks. Jon looks at the sea. Nothing he has. Something else. He leaves it there. Dayne sets down his cup, looks at Jon in the sidelong way he has, which is the way of a man who has watched someone his entire life and still occasionally catches himself surprised. "Your father would have put it differently. He'd have framed it as the sword needing the stone, each thing incomplete without the other. Jon turns to look at him. Dayne almost never volunteers anything about Rhaegar. Jon has learned to be still when it happens, the way you are still around something that will disappear if you reach for it. He used to talk about it, Dayne says, to the middle distance, the shape of the realm he wanted, not the realm he'd inherited, the one that was theoretically possible if people could manage to stop killing each other for long enough to build it. He pauses. He wasn't wrong about the theory, he was wrong about the cost. He thought the cost was his. The silence after that is not uncomfortable. It is the silence of people who have learned that not everything requires a response. The map room after midday. Barristan walks the board with the patience of a man who has done this 100 times and believes it will take 100 more before it is properly absorbed. The Tyrells, Jon says, looking at Highgarden. If it came to it, Lady Olenna is the decision, not Lord Mace. She will negotiate before she commits. She'll want something visible, something that changes the Tyrell position permanently. A queen, she would name it exactly that way. And Dorne doesn't need persuading. Jon's finger moves south, not a question. Dorne needs confirmation, not persuasion, the confirmation of two facts. Barristan looks at him, one of which walks into a room and the other of which has been on Arthur's back for 16 years. Jon nods. He traces the King's Road from Moat Cailin south, through the Riverlands all the way to King's Landing. He has never seen any of it. He knows every mile of it from Barristan's descriptions, where the road narrows, where it floods in the rains, which lords hold the keeps that control the choke points. He knows the Red Keep's corridors the way he knows this training yard, from the inside, in the dark, without needing to think. He has never seen snow. He wants to. It is the one thing he has asked Barristan to describe more than once. Winterfell in deep winter, the gods' wood under 3 feet of white, the way the cold sits in the stone of the castle and breathes back out at you from the walls. Barristan describes it carefully each time, because he understands, without Jon needing to explain it, why the asking matters. The knock at the outer gate comes before the sun hits the western wall. One of the household men opens it. The rider who enters is salt-stained, thin from the journey, leading a horse that has been ridden past its preference for several days. A Dayne household man, the kind who doesn't appear unless the appearance is necessary. The seal on the letter he carries is broken, not by him, by whoever searched the second ship. He took 3 ships to lose the tale. Arthur Dayne reads the letter first. He reads it the way he does everything, without visible reaction, his face doing less than other men's faces do when they are thinking about nothing at all. He holds it for a moment after reading, passes it without a word to Barristan Selmy. Barristan reads it. Something tightens around his eyes. He slides it across the table to Jon. Jon reads it. The thing that has been in his eyes since the session ended. The quality that Barristan noticed this morning and named correctly, the patience of someone waiting for something that has not yet arrived, is gone. Something else is there instead. Something that has been underneath the patience all along, the whole 17 years of it, waiting for exactly this kind of permission to surface. He sets the letter down on the map. He says nothing. He doesn't need to. Tyrosh, continuous Arthur Dayne is at the map before the silence ends. He moves the way he always does when something requires decision. Not urgently, which would signal alarm, but with the particular directness of a man who has already passed through the receiving of information and arrived at the processing of it. He sets his cup on the bench outside, forgets to bring it in, and crosses to the map table without looking at either of them. That cup left behind. That small forgetting. Jon catalogues it without comment. Ned Stark. Jon says it aloud because the room needs the words in it, and because saying it converts what he has read into something that is simply irrevocably true. Arrested. Treason charge. He's in the black cells of King's Landing. He sets the letter flat on the table, over the Crownlands, where it belongs. Robert is dead. Joffrey Baratheon has been crowned. A death warrant exists, signed by the boy. A pause. Robb Stark's bannermen are raising. He is marching south. The Riverlands are burning under Lannister advance. He stops. The letter has said what it needed to say. How many men does the Stark boy have? Arthur says. Not a question, a request for a number. The letter doesn't give a count, Barristan says. Enough to move, enough to give Tywin something to think about. Tywin's host is in the field. Dayne traces the Riverlands with one finger, moving south to where the road narrows at the choke points Jon has memorized from this same table. Jaime holds the western riverine approach. That leaves King's Landing defended by garrison alone. He is quiet for a moment. It's thin. Very thin, Barristan says. His voice carries something that is not present when he discusses forced dispositions or political calculation. Ned Stark in the black cells, on a fabricated charge. This is not a strategic variable to Barristan Selmy. It is a statement about what 16 years of Lannister proximity to power produces when left unchecked. Jon suspects that when Barristan looks at the map right now, he sees every accommodation he observed from inside the White Cloak, everything left unsaid to the wrong king, every compromise that led through a long and entirely logical chain to exactly this. He kept his word, Barristan says, quietly, to no one in particular, and to all of them. For 17 years he kept the secret and bore the weight of it without asking anything in return, and this is what the realm has done with him. No one answers. There is nothing useful to add to it. Jon looks at the board. He has been looking at configurations of that board for most of his conscious life. Barristan walked him through every possible alignment the Seven Kingdoms could produce under the pressure of war, which alliances fracture under which specific loads, which lords follow blood and which follow coin, and which follow whoever arrived most recently with a credible army. He has spent years preparing for the abstract version of this moment. The abstract version has just become specific. This is the moment, Jon says. Dayne looks up from the road lines. Barristan is already watching. Not eventually, now. His voice is flat and certain, not the certainty of someone asserting their will, but of someone stating a conclusion they have tested from every angle and found that it holds. Robb Stark's army is in motion but has not yet committed to a major engagement. The Lannisters are overextended across 3 separate fronts simultaneously. Stannis is maneuvering from Dragonstone. Renly is maneuvering from Storm's End. Neither of them is coordinating with the other, and neither of them is moving with enough urgency to matter for what is about to happen to Ned Stark. He places one hand flat on the map, not pointing at anything in particular, just acknowledging the entire surface of it. Every faction with a claim or a grievance or a host in the field is moving at once. The board is completely unstable. A stable kingdom defends itself, Dayne says, not completing Jon's thought. Confirming it, he has said this to Jon before, in a different context years ago. A kingdom at war can be entered. Jon continues without pause. We don't arrive after the outcome is decided and argue our legitimacy from a position of nothing. We arrive before the first real battle lands, and we change what the battle is about. He looks at Arthur. How long to provision the ship? 10 hours. Less if we're moving before the harbor district opens fully. Then we move before the harbor district opens. Barristan has not spoken during this. He is watching Jon with an expression that carries no surprise. He has not been surprised by anything Jon Snow has done in the last 4 years, but something sits underneath the assessment that has warmth in it. White Harbor, Barristan says. White Harbor. Jon looks at the northern coastline, the most dependable Stark loyalist in the north, with sufficient influence to give us a door into Robb Stark's war council without announcing our presence to everyone who walks past a corridor. Manderley. Lord Wyman is old, overweight, more capable than he presents himself as being, and devoted to House Stark in the specific way of men who remember what House Stark has meant to the North for 8,000 years. Jon traces the harbor mark on the map with one finger. He will not need convincing, he will need confirmation. Those are different things. Dayne sets both hands on the table's edge, and if he delays access to Robb's counsel, he won't. Jon says it the way he arrives at most conclusions, as a calculated output rather than a declaration. But even in that case, we need a northern landing that does not announce us to Lannister ears before we have established a single alliance. White Harbor is the only port that gives us that. He steps back from the table. We do not go as a conquering force. He says this directly, without the slightest indication that it troubles him. We have nothing to conquer with. What we have is this. He looks at Dayne. One sword that no one in Westeros knows is still in the world, carried by a man the realm buried 16 years ago. One blade that has never been matched in living memory, and Dawn wrapped in oilcloth on its bearer's back, and the moment that wrapping comes off, Dorne moves before the day is out. He looks at Barristan, one name that commands more respect across more great houses than any title or army currently deployed, a name that people think they are mourning, and will find they were wrong. He pauses, and one face that changes the entire structure of the succession question, the moment the right person sees it and has confirmed what they're looking at. He picks up the letter and holds it. No army, no existing alliances. 3 men and the truth, which is the only asset we carry that operates at full value regardless of how many swords are standing next to it. Barristan is quiet for a long moment. "You've been building this argument for years," he says. "I've been building the general shape for years. The specific timing arrived an hour ago in a salt-stained letter. Jon sets it back on the map. Ned Stark is in the black cells. He cannot wait for us to be more ready than we are. We are as ready as 16 years can make us." He looks at both of them. That will have to be sufficient. The plan requires almost no discussion to become fixed, because the three of them have spent 16 years constructing every component of it without formally calling it by its name. They land at White Harbor. They find Manderley. They enter Robb Stark's war effort under a name that is true and incomplete at once. Aegon Targaryen exile, ward of Arthur Dayne, come to offer his sword to the cause of justice for Eddard Stark. No full declaration. Not yet. The truth comes out in stages, at moments Jon selects, to people he has assessed as capable of receiving it without immediately complicating it. The North first, then Dorne, which will move the moment Arthur Dayne walks into a room breathing. Then the Reach, which requires Barristan at his most precise, and Lady Olenna at her most self-interested, which is to say, her most honest. Not conquest, a reveal. A carefully staged presentation of a reality that has existed for 17 years, finally offered to an audience that was never given the chance to know it. 3 weeks at sea, perhaps 4 if the narrow sea is difficult this season, then 10 days of hard riding to reach Robb Stark's position, wherever it has moved to by then. The window for Ned Stark's life is narrow enough that the word barely covers it. None of them say this aloud. All of them know it. Tyrosh does not notice them leave. The harbor district is already in full argument before the sun clears the eastern towers. Ropes slapping hulls, sailors cursing in Tyroshi and debased Valyrian, and the approximate common tongue that materializes when people who share no language need to move cargo and are annoyed about it. Children run the full length of the dock on errands that are probably legitimate. A fishmonger is explaining something to another fishmonger with the intensity of a man who has been wronged in a manner he considers cosmically significant. The cog flies the Tyroshi colors it has always flown. The captain takes the payment without counting it, not from blind trust, but from long experience with what it means when these 3 men require an early departure, which is that the counting is a waste of time they have already decided not to spend. Arthur Dayne boards first. Don in oilcloth on his back, bundled like a merchant's personal effects, giving nothing away to any eye that doesn't already know. He boards without announcement and finds a position at the rail without ceremony, the way he occupies any space, completely and without waste. Barristan Selmy boards in a gray wool merchant's coat. He stands at the base of the gangway for a moment before stepping up. In the plain gray of it, no white anywhere on him. He has not worn an outfit without white since the day he was knighted, since the ceremony that rearranged the entire shape of his life in one gesture. He looks at the coat for a moment, adjusting nothing, simply acknowledging what it is. Then he steps onto the gangway and does not look back at the life the coat used to represent. Jon boards last. He stands at the stern as Tyrosh pulls back behind them, the gold and purple of its towers catching the early light, the noise of its commerce rising across the water, the city conducting its 1,000-year conversation with itself in complete indifference to the 3 men leaving its harbor. It does not know what has just departed from it. It will not notice the absence. He watches the city become smaller, become a suggestion, become a line of color on the gray horizon. Then he turns west. The narrow sea is wide and flat and cold this morning, and Westeros is somewhere on the far side of it, 3 weeks away in the dark. Ned Stark is in a cell beneath a city Jon knows from a table and 16 years of an old man's careful memory. Robb Stark is moving south with an army toward a war that none of its participants fully understand yet. Jon keeps his face to the west and his hands loose at his sides. There is nothing behind him now worth turning back for. White Harbor, 3 weeks later. White Harbor greets them with gray. Gray water in the harbor, gray stone in the walls that ring the city's eastern approach, gray sky pressing low overhead with the flatness of a sky that is considering what to do about the cold and hasn't decided yet. Even the gulls are gray, circling the masts of the trading ships in the harbor with the resigned industriousness of creatures who have never expected anything warmer. The city smells of fish and salt and wood smoke and something that is not quite winter but is winter's opening argument. Jon stands at the bow as the cog comes in and says nothing. He has been to Essos ports. He knows Tyrosh from the water, knows the particular gold and noise of it, and has seen the silhouette of Pentos on the horizon once, and various lesser harbors along the narrow sea's western edge. He has never been to any part of Westeros. He was born here, in a desert tower 1,500 miles to the south, and taken east within the week, and in 17 years he has not returned. White Harbor is not deeply northern by the standards of what lies beyond it. It sits at the southern reach of the north, oriented toward trade and away from the full severity of what winter means farther inland. But it is northern enough. The cold comes off the stone buildings and off the harbor water with a quality that Tyrosh does not produce and cannot imitate. The cold of a place that knows exactly what it is and makes no accommodation for anyone who doesn't. Jon breathes it in. He thinks, practically for the first time, about snow. Deep water berth, Arthur says at his shoulder. East side of the outer harbor. Nothing that marks which ship we arrived on. Agreed. The dock district absorbs them without difficulty. A Taroshi merchant cog is ordinary in any harbor with ambitions toward trade, and 3 men in plain clothes with understated baggage are a poor candidate for sustained attention at any time. The harbor district has its own considerable concerns. Jon reads the specific quality of them as they move through it. This is not the noise of a place conducting its usual business. It is the noise of a place that has absorbed the logistics of war and is still processing the weight of what that means. Robb Stark's bannermen have passed through here. Supplies have moved south through these streets. The people walking the dock have the purposefulness of men and women who have been told that what they do now carries consequences beyond the ordinary. There is no snow yet. The sky is still considering it. They request audience with Lord Wyman Manderly on the strength of 7 words delivered to his household steward at the Newcastle's servant entrance. Urgent intelligence regarding the Lord of Winterfell. The steward makes the calculation that every steward makes when faced with the impossible choice between protecting his lord's time and failing to deliver something his lord would have wanted. He takes them to a small anteroom with a fire and a harbor window and tells them to wait. They wait for 20 minutes. Jon watches the harbor. Arthur watches the door. Barristan sits with his hands folded and his eyes on the middle distance, and his mind, Jon suspects, somewhere south of here, in a cell beneath the city. Lord Wyman Manderly fills the doorway when he arrives, which is not a figure of speech. He is enormous, not merely heavy but large in every direction, the kind of man who has spent a long life eating generously and sleeping badly and compensating for the second with more of the first. His hair is white, his beard is white, his face carries 60 years of temperamental cheerfulness that is currently in direct conflict with the news arriving from the south on every raven his maester can catch. He has gout in his left foot. He manages it with the practiced irritability of someone who has refused to let it stop him but hasn't forgiven it for the attempt. He takes in the anteroom in one quick look. He is more capable than he looks. Jon had been told this. He observes it now in the quality of that single sweep of the eyes across 3 men and what they carry. He looks at Barristan Selmy first. The look lasts long enough to have weight in it. No, Lord Manderly says, very quietly, for a man of his size. No, that isn't. You can't be. He stops. His eyes move to the second man. Arthur Dayne stands with his hands at his sides, still, the way a stone is still. Not because nothing is happening, but because everything happening is entirely internal. His face is older now, 16 years of exile worked into it. But it is still the face that 50,000 songs described. He is too specific to be mistaken. The lines of him are too particular. He is one of perhaps 6 men alive who would be recognized by any lord in any of the 7 kingdoms without needing to give a name. And he is looking at Wyman Manderly with the same composed attention he gives everything. The bundle wrapped in cloth on his back catches the gray light through the window. Lord Manderly's hand finds the door frame. Not dramatically, not to catch himself physically. He is giving himself one fixed point to hold against while everything he believed about the last 16 years reorganizes itself. Sir Arthur, he says. My lord. Arthur's voice is exactly what it always is. Level, unhurried, containing nothing that doesn't need to be there, we were told. Manderly stops, Ned said. The songs all said. He stops again. The songs are wrong on this point, Barristan says, and on several others that will matter before this is finished. Manderly looks at Barristan for a long, steady moment. Then he steps fully into the anteroom. He closes the door behind him with a care that indicates he has already decided, on instinct, that this conversation belongs to no one standing in corridors. He draws himself up to his full height, significant, even diminished by age and gout, and waits. He waits with the attentiveness of a man who has just understood that he is about to be given something he needs to receive correctly. "Tell me," Lord Manderley says. It takes the better part of an hour. Jon does most of the telling. He has understood since early in the journey that there would be a version of this conversation, and he has thought carefully about how to conduct it. When you have one opportunity to give someone a set of facts that contradict everything they believed, and you need them to accept all of it before they leave the room, the most important decision is not what you say but how you say it, without embellishment, without performance, without the rhetorical structures men reach for when they are uncertain of their ground. The facts are sufficient. The facts, stated plainly, are more extraordinary than any ornamentation could improve. He gives Manderley the Tower of Joy, the real version, the one with Howland Reed's blade going wide of spine and lung by 3 inches, the one that ended with a dead man rising from the sand and walking east with a baby. He gives him the marriage, the High Septon's record in the Citadel archive, the legal structure of what Rhaegar and Lyanna did in Dorne, and what it means for every question of succession the realm has been asking incorrectly for 17 years. He gives him Tyrosh and the estate on the promontory, and 2 Grand Masters and a sword education that began when he was 4 years old. Then he gives him the part that costs something to say aloud. "Ned Stark is my uncle," Jon says. "Not my father. My mother was Lyanna Stark. My father was Rhaegar Targaryen. Ned took me north and called me his bastard because the alternative was my death at the hands of a man he loved, who would not have hesitated." He holds Manderley's gaze. He has been protecting me with his honor and his reputation for 17 years. That protection has cost him everything a man like him values. And now he is in a cell beneath a city we need to reach, and we have very little time. The anteroom is quiet. Lord Manderley looks at Jon's face. He looks at it the way a man looks at something he is genuinely trying to find the failure in, the seam, the point where the claim falls apart. He looks with the careful intelligence of a man who has navigated northern politics for 4 decades and has learned to find the place where a story stops being true. He doesn't find it. The dark hair, the gray eyes, the particular shape of a face that belongs without ambiguity to a bloodline he has known in all its variations, the bloodline that has held Winterfell since a time before the Andals crossed the narrow sea, whose children Manderley has watched grow up for 60 years, whose name is stitched into the oldest loyalties the North carries. "She had gray eyes," Manderley says softly. "Lyanna? I saw her once. A tournament she was 14 years old and she rode like she was angry at the horse for not going faster." He looks at Jon. "You have her eyes." "I know," Jon says. Lord Wyman Manderley goes to one knee. Slowly, with the effort of a man for whom that motion costs something, the floor creaks under him. He does not appear to notice. "Your Grace," he says. Jon looks at him on the floor of a White Harbor anteroom. This vast, white-haired man with gout and genuine feeling and considerably more capability than his cheerful exterior has ever advertised, and allows himself exactly 2 seconds to feel the weight of what it means to have that said to him by a human being, in a real room, for the first time. "Get up, my lord," he says. "We don't have time for the floor." Manderley gets up, grunting, taking the doorframe again. When he is upright, his eyes are bright in the way of a man who has been carrying a grief for a long time and has just been handed an unexpected reason to set it down. "Ned," he says, the name comes out rougher than he intended. He's been carrying that, alone for all these years. "Not entirely alone," Barristan says, "but yes. How long do we have for Ned?" "We don't know exactly," Jon says. "Not long, which is why I need what you know. Where is Robb Stark's host right now?" Manderley moves to the table. He pulls a working map from the chest beneath the window with considerably more speed than his gout usually allows, spreading it flat with both hands, and Jon notices that the cheerful lord has been set completely aside. Something more functional has stepped forward in his place, and the transition is total. "He crossed Moat Cailin 11 days ago," Manderley says, pointing, "moving south at a pace that suggests he knows urgency is the point. Last Raven put him here, upper Riverlands, making for the Twins." He looks up. He needs Frey's bridge to cross. "The Freys will negotiate," Barristan says. "The Freys will negotiate precisely as long as it profits them, and not a single hour past that." Manderley's voice has the dryness of a man who has dealt with the Freys of the crossing before and formed a permanent opinion. He needs to reach them before they decide which way the wind is turning, and sell that information to whoever is buying. Jon looks at the map. The distances are familiar from the Tyrosh table. He has studied them in ink for years. Seeing them on rougher parchment in a cold northern anteroom does not change what they are, but the weight behind them is different now. They are no longer abstract. "We ride tomorrow," Jon says. "South. Fast. We need to reach Robb Stark before the twins make a calculation that costs us everything. I'll give you horses." Manderly says it without hesitation, the words of a man who has already moved past the question of whether and into the question of how. "My best animals. And men, quiet men, the kind who understand that what they see on the road does not travel further than necessary. Small escort, no banners. Nothing that announces us before we choose to be announced." Manderly nods. He is looking at the three of them with something that Jon has no simple name for, the expression of a man who has held a diminished and privately embarrassing hope for a very long time, and has just discovered, against all the reasonable evidence of 17 years, that the hope was not wrong. "Ned Stark told me once," Manderly says, "that the North remembers." He says it quietly, with the care of a man handling something that matters. I understood what he meant in a general way. I understand it specifically now. He looks at Jon, at the gray eyes, at the Stark face carrying the Targaryen name, and something settles in him, something that has been unsettled since a raven arrived from King's Landing with the worst news a northern lord could receive. He turns back to the map. He begins to plan. The fire burns in the grate. Outside the window, the harbor goes about its business. Somewhere to the south, a boy of 18 is marching with an army toward a war he understands incompletely, to save a father he does not yet know how to save. And in a White Harbor anteroom, the shape of the answer is beginning to find its edges. The Riverlands and the Reach. Concurrent. Barristan Selmy rides west from Jon's column with 3 men and a letter sealed with nothing, which is by design. The Tyrell host is 2 days' march east of Highgarden, moving with the specific uncertainty of an army that has been given a direction but not a coherent enemy, which is what the Lannister alliance looks like from the Tyrell side, since Jaime's capture made its way north on every raven with functioning wings. Lady Olenna Tyrell is in the 3rd wagon of the command column, which is larger than most houses and furnished with enough considered comfort to suggest she finds the concept of campaigning personally insulting, but has declined to let that stop her. She looks at Barristan Selmy when he enters and says nothing for a long moment. "Barristan Selmy," she says finally. "I sent flowers to your memorial service. I don't do that for many people. I'm told they were lovely, my lady. Of course they were. I don't send ugly flowers." She looks at him with the attention of someone who never wastes the act of looking. "You're supposed to be dead. It's a misunderstanding I'm working to correct." She gestures at the seat across from her. "Sit. And before you give me whatever speech you've been rehearsing on the road, let me save us both the time. You're here because Arthur Dayne appeared in the Riverlands 4 days ago, and my informants cannot stop sending me ravens about it, which means whoever Dayne is riding with has decided the Tyrell army is worth the conversation." She folds her hands. "I'm listening. Be brief." Barristan sits. He has spent 40 years as the most respected knight in Westeros, and has never particularly deployed that fact as an instrument. He deploys it now simply by being present and being exactly who he is, which produces its own argument before he opens his mouth. Renly Baratheon has no legitimate claim under any succession framework that survives scrutiny, he says. "I offer no commentary on his other qualities, which were considerable," Olenna says. "Continue. Stannis Baratheon has a legally sound claim and a temperament that will punish every house that backed his brother or the Lannisters. House Tyrell besieged Storm's End for the better part of a year. Extraordinarily long memory, Stannis. It's his single most exhausting quality. Joffrey Baratheon is not Robert's son." Barristan says it without flourish, without drama, the weight of someone who was close enough to the truth long enough to know exactly what it looks like. He is Jaime Lannister's son. As are Tommen and Myrcella. The documentation exists. The physical evidence exists. He will not survive a serious examination of his claim. Olenna is very still for a moment. Then she says quietly, "I had wondered. For years, I had wondered." She does not elaborate. She doesn't need to. Go on. Aegon Targaryen, son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark, wed before the appropriate religious authority in a documented ceremony. Trueborn, legitimate under every succession law the Seven Kingdoms recognizes. Barristan pauses. Arthur Dayne has been alive for 17 years. He spent them training the heir. He is now in the field with dawn drawn, and the realm can see him. He lets that settle, and House Tyrell holds Highgarden because a Targaryen gave it to them when the gardeners burned at the Field of Fire. It might be worth considering what it means to put a Targaryen back where he belongs. The wagon rolls. The Tyrell host moves outside, flags and uncertainty in equal measure. The boy, Olenna says. What is he actually like? Not what you want him to be, what he is. He is the most frightening 17-year-old I have encountered in 40 years of serving men with armies. Frightening, precise, patient. He disarmed Jaime Lannister in the Riverlands in under a minute, with a plain sword in front of 18,000 witnesses. When Jaime asked who had trained him, he said, "Someone who is here," and did not elaborate. Olenna is quiet for the specific duration of a woman whose mind is moving faster than the silence implies. "Marjorie," she says. "My lady, don't be obtuse, Sir Barristan. You know exactly what I'm about to say." "I know what you're going to say," he agrees. "My granddaughter is queen. That is the price of this conversation becoming an agreement. I don't negotiate it downward, and I don't accept substitutes." She tilts her head slightly. "Can your Targaryen stomach a Tyrell queen?" "He can stomach whatever the realm requires of him." "Good. Because the realm will require a great many things it hasn't previously had to stomach, and a king who selects his necessities based on personal comfort has a very short reign." She picks up her cup. "The Tyrell host will not march to reinforce King's Landing. That is what we are agreeing to. In exchange, my granddaughter becomes queen when your king sits the throne, and the Lannister alliance discovers today that it has 50,000 fewer swords. A sip. Go back to your king and tell him the Queen of Thorns sends her regards and expects to be seated appropriately at the coronation feast." "I'll tell him." "Tell him also," she adds, as Barristan rises, "that if he turns out to be another heiress, I will personally ensure his reign is a brief and instructive one." She says it pleasantly, with the smile of a woman who is describing something entirely within her capacity to arrange. "I've outlasted 3 kings. A 4th is not beyond me. I don't believe it will come to that, my lady." "Neither do I," Olenna says, "but it's important that he knows I've considered it." Oberyn Martell arrives at Jon's camp 2 hours before sunset with 20 Dornish riders and no banners, which is the style of a man who intends to be seen by the right people without being announced to everyone else. Jon is at the command table with Robb when the guards bring the news. He is not surprised. A raven from Sunspear confirmed Oberyn was moving north before the details of the Whispering Wood had fully dried. He goes out to meet him. Oberyn Martell is lean with the compact efficiency of a man who has never carried anything he couldn't use in a fight. He is dressed in Dornish silks under northern riding leathers, a combination that should look wrong and somehow doesn't. His spear is on his back. His eyes are on Arthur Dayne, who has come out of the command tent and stopped. The 2 men look at each other across 15 feet of Riverland's mud. Oberyn's face does something that is not within a Dornishman's typical range of public expression. It does it briefly. Then he closes the distance in 6 steps and takes Arthur Dayne in both arms with the grip of a man who has been told something is dead for 16 years and has just been handed the physical proof that he was lied to, and is both furious about it and entirely unable to care about the fury right now. Arthur Dayne puts one hand on Oberyn's back and says nothing. He lets it be what it is. It takes a moment. When Oberyn pulls back, his eyes are dry because he is Oberyn Martell, and Oberyn Martell does not weep in front of witnesses if he can prevent it. But it was close. "You were at the Tower of Joy," Oberyn says, "protecting his son." "Yes. You couldn't protect Elia." "No. You know what they did to her." "I know." Oberyn looks at him for a long moment. Then he releases Arthur's shoulders and turns. He looks at Jon. Jon looks back. Oberyn takes him in the way a man takes in something he has been told to expect, and finds he was not fully prepared for regardless. The dark hair, the gray eyes, the age that does not match the quality of stillness behind them. "You look like your mother," Oberyn says. "I've been told." Rhaegar sent Arthur a raven the night Lyanna agreed to go with him to Dorne. He wrote that she had her family's face and none of their patience. The ghost of something that is grief and fondness simultaneously crosses Oberyn's face. He was accurate on both counts. His assessment of Jon shifts from the personal to the professional. "You disarmed Jaime Lannister." "Yes." "With an ordinary sword." "Yes." "How long?" "Long enough to show him 2 false patterns. Then it was finished." Something in Oberyn almost smiles. The smile that people who know him are slightly afraid of, even as they feel its warmth. "Your father believed in the poetic finish. A blade in the exact right place at the exact right moment. Arranged as though it was always going to happen that way." He glances at Arthur. "You trained that out of him." "I trained precision in," Arthur says, The economy came from somewhere else. Oberyn looks back at Jon. The warmth recedes, leaving something colder and more specific underneath. Rhaegar Clegane is commanding the King's Landing garrison, he says. I know. He raped my sister. He killed her children. He killed her. Each sentence arrives at the same volume as the last, with the same absence of decoration, which is somehow far worse than if they had been shouted. Your father's choice, Rhaegar's choice to take Lyanna Stark to Dorne instead of returning to Elia, put my sister alone in King's Landing when Tywin Lannister opened the gates. I want that acknowledged between us before we take another step. Jon holds his gaze. Rhaegar's choice cost your sister her life and her children theirs. That truth doesn't become smaller because of what he felt for my mother. Rhaegar Clegane committed those murders because Tywin Lannister ordered them and Robert Baratheon looked at the bodies and turned away. He pauses. Every one of them answers for it. That is what this march is for. Not the throne alone, the accounting. Oberyn watches him for a long moment. Good, he says. Then we agree on what we're actually doing. We do. Doran has 8,000 Dornish cavalry positioned 3 days south of King's Landing. He shifts to the practical with the speed of a man who has completed his emotional assessment and moved on. They will be in place before we arrive from the north. Cersei will have Lannister troops on 2 sides and a harbor she cannot sail out of without passing Dornish ships. He looks at Arthur. Can we end this without burning the city? Yes, Arthur says. If we move quickly, then we move quickly. Oberyn turns back to Jon. One condition. Name it. Rhaegar Clegane is mine. Jon looks at the Red Viper of Dorne, who has ridden 2,000 miles north on 16 years of patience and a specific, carefully maintained grief, and makes the only honest assessment available to him. If you're there when the moment comes, Jon says, he is yours. Not a gift. An acknowledgement. Oberyn hears the difference and receives it correctly. Then we ride at dawn, he says. I didn't come this far to camp in the Riverlands. Barristan Selmy returns to camp 2 hours after dark with the composure of a man who has done what he set out to do, and sees no performance required about it. The Tyrell host stands down, he tells Jon and Robb at the command table. 50,000 swords that will not reach King's Landing before we do. Her price, Jon says, Marjorie Tyrell as queen. She named it without preamble. Jon nods once. He looks at the map, the distance between where they stand and where King's Landing waits. Robb's 18,000 pressing from the north. Dornish cavalry closing from the south. A harbor that is no longer safe. A Tyrell army that has simply stopped. Jaime Lannister is in chains. Tywin's main host is 5 days south and marching in the wrong direction. Cersei is in the Red Keep with a garrison, a child dressed as a king, and a political position that has been reduced to whatever fits inside city walls. How long to the city? Jon says. 3 days at the current pace, Robb says. Jon looks at the map, at the cell somewhere beneath the Red Keep where a man has been sitting in the dark, waiting for something to change. 2, he says. We move in 2. He puts the map down and walks out of the tent. Outside, the camp goes about the busy quiet of an army that knows what tomorrow begins and intends to finish it. King's Landing, continuous King's Landing, takes 2 days to understand what has happened to it. The first day, northern banners appear on the hills north of the city. 18,000 Stark men establishing camp at the base of the King's Road, close enough that the watch on the walls can see individual cook fires, no siege equipment, no ladders, no rams, just men and horses and banners waiting. The second day, Dornish colors appear on the Rose Road, south of the city. 8,000 Dornish cavalry taking position with the ease of an army that has been marching toward a specific destination for 3 weeks and has now arrived at it. The harbor master sends a rider to the Red Keep before noon to report that Dornish ships have positioned themselves at the mouth of the Blackwater Rush. The city is not under attack, it is simply enclosed. And enclosed cities, Jon has been told by every man who has studied what cities do under pressure, make calculations. Most of them reach the same conclusion. By the morning of the 3rd day, 3 city gates have quietly opened, not surrendering to anyone, simply unlocked. Jon notes this from the command position north of the Mudgate and makes a different decision. Not through the gates, he says. He looks at Barristan. Below. Barristan nods. He has been waiting for exactly this. The armor goes on in Jon's tent an hour before midnight. He has worn it in pieces. The greaves, the vambrace, the gorget, during the march south the way a man wears any practical equipment. He has never worn it whole. Arthur fastens the last buckle at the shoulder in silence. The black plate settles against Jon's frame with the weight of something that has been made for exactly this body and has been waiting for it. The silver wolf on the breastplate, the three-headed dragon in silver above it, the gray fur cloak. Winter fire comes out of its oilcloth for the first time since Tyrosh. 16 years. Arthur commissioned it from the best master smith in the Free City when Jon was 1 year old. Black handle. Valyrian steel so dark it seems to pull the torchlight inward rather than reflect it. Jon takes it, turns it once in his hand, feels the weight that is not quite like any other weight. Your father believed, Arthur says, looking at the blade rather than at Jon, that a sword this old carries something of every man who held it. He pauses. He would have wanted you to hold it well. Jon looks at Arthur. I will. 32 men. Blacked out. No torches, no banners. Jon and Arthur at the front, Barristan at the left shoulder with his memory of every passage built under Maegor's bloody reign. They move into the dark below King's Landing. Maegor the Cruel built his tunnels to protect himself and to kill everyone who knew they existed. He succeeded at the second part. 150 years later, the passages remain beneath the city in the way that things built to outlast their builders outlast everyone else as well. They smell of stone and standing water and something older than both. The ceiling drops in places until Jon has to angle his head. The floor is wet with seepage that has been seeping since before anyone alive was born. Sound moves strangely down here. The city above is muffled into occasional rumbles of cartwheel and footfall, the breathing of a place that does not know what is moving under its foundations. Barristan leads without a moment's uncertainty. He memorized these passages the way he memorized everything he believed might be necessary, methodically, completely, as a man who learned early that the difference between knowing something and knowing it precisely is the difference between returning and not. No official record acknowledges they exist. Barristan carries them in memory alone. Left at the cistern junction, right where the older wall shows through, the stone changing color at the seam. Straight for 40 measured paces where the smell shifts towards seawater. Jon counts alongside, not from doubt, from the discipline of counting which keeps the mind from creating threats in the dark that are not there. He listens to the city above. He hears it afraid. The specific quiet of streets that have emptied not from curfew but from calculation. The sound of 500,000 people determining, individually and collectively, that the inside of their homes is the correct answer to tonight's question. Afraid cities, he has been told, surrender faster. He believes it now in his feet, in the stone under them. At the junction below the Red Keep's oldest foundation, Barristan stops. Turns. Wildfire stores are north 80 paces, then east through the guild's subcellar, he says, barely above silence. Black cells are straight ahead. Jon looks at him. Take 10 men. Move the cauldrons away from ignition range. Seal the passage after. The pyromancers, they're scholars, Jon says. Tell them who you are. The nearest thing Barristan Selmy has to a smile in a situation like this crosses his face briefly. He takes 10 men and moves north. Jon takes the rest and goes straight. The black cells are below the dungeons, below the regular cells, in the part of the Red Keep that Maegor built for the express purpose of making people choose between their secrets and their sanity. There are no windows. There has not been light in this passage since before the guards at the entry brought their torches. 4 guards at the entry corridor. Arthur Dayne handles them in 9 seconds, in the dark, without drawing dawn. They are breathing when it is over. They will not be in a condition to report anything for some time. Jon takes a torch from the nearest sconce and walks the cells. First cell, empty. A smell that suggests it has not always been. Second, a man who is not Ned Stark. Jon checks because certainty is the point, not assumption. Third cell. Jon kneels at the bars. The figure inside is thinner than any description Jon carried through 17 years of secondhand knowledge. His hair is matted and long, his face reduced to its structural essentials by weeks of insufficient food and total darkness. The dark in there is absolute, not the dark of a room without candles, but the dark of a place engineered to be its own deprivation. Ned Stark is sitting against the far wall with his knees drawn up and his eyes open, and the careful stillness of a man who has been rationing everything he has left for a purpose he has not abandoned. Torchlight reaches him. He turns his face toward it the way a plant turns toward light. Involuntary, the body responding before the mind has finished deciding whether to trust it. He squints against the brightness of something as ordinary as a torch. He looks at the bars, at the torchlight, at the face on the other side of it. He is a man of the north, practical, not given to things that are not present. He has been in the dark long enough to be cautious about what the dark offers. He looks at the face in front of him with the attention of a man making absolutely certain. Then Arthur Dayne steps into the torchlight in the doorway behind Jon. Ned Stark does not weep. He is Ned Stark, and this is not what he does. Not in front of witnesses, not even now. But something crosses his face in that moment that is every suppressed thing arriving without order. Every year of the kept secret. Every morning he looked at his wife, knowing what she believed and knowing the truth. Every time Jon called him father in a voice that did not know any better. All of it arriving at once, without armor. He moves across the cell on legs that have not had proper use in weeks. He reaches through the bars. He takes Jon's face in both hands. His hands are cold from the stone. His hands are shaking. He says very quietly, one word. Lyanna. Jon covers Ned's hands with his own. She kept her promise through you, Jon says. Now I'm keeping mine. Nothing else is required. This is the entirety of what the last 17 years were for, reduced to 2 men at a set of bars in the dark below a city, and it is sufficient unto itself. Jon gets the cell open. Arthur takes Ned's weight with the matter-of-fact steadiness of a man who understands that practical care is the only form of respect available to the moment. The men move. 3 passages to the north. Barristan Selmy is in a guild subcellar, holding a torch, looking at 6 pyromancers who have spent their professional lives working with the most destructive substance in Westeros, and have just made the rapid assessment that Barristan Selmy appearing at their door in the middle of the night is not an occasion for resistance. The wildfire cauldrons are moved from ignition range in 20 minutes. Not a drop of blood. The doors to the throne room are 30 feet of iron-reinforced oak, and Jon opens them himself. No kick, no announcement. Both hands on the iron rings, a steady push, and they swing on hinges that are well maintained because the Red Keep's staff do their work regardless of who sits above them. Jon walks through the opening alone. Arthur Dayne and Barristan Selmy remain in the doorway. They stand there, the way things stand that do not need to explain themselves. The sword of the morning with dawn on his back, the greatest living knight in white armor with the Kingsguard pin he never formally relinquished. 2 men who were dead, very much present. The statement they make simply by existing in that threshold saves Jon approximately 1,000 words. He walks the length of the throne room. He has crossed this floor 10,000 times in memory, in Barristan's descriptions measured and exact across 13 years of evening instruction. The real floor is the same dimensions and an entirely different quality. Colder, the vaulted ceiling lost to shadow above the torchlight. The banners changed enough times to have forgotten their original meaning. The floor a long, unbroken plane of stone between where he is and where he is going. He stops at the base of the steps. The Iron Throne is more hideous at close range than any description prepared him for. It is the swords of kings defeated in the conquest, gathered by Aegon the Dragon Lord and melted in the fire of Balerion the Black Dread, reformed into this thing that has stood for 300 years, blade edges jutting at every angle. Old darkness worked into the metal between them, accumulated from everything that has happened in this room. The point of it was never comfort. The point was that you could sit it, and in sitting it demonstrate that you had survived everything required to get there. Joffrey Baratheon sits at the top of the steps. He is wearing gilded armor adjusted for a boy's frame, imperfectly. His face is arranged into what he has been raised to understand as an imperial expression. Underneath the arrangement, a 16-year-old who has heard something large moving in the dark outside the window and has not yet decided whether to be afraid of it. Cersei stands at his right, in green that matches nothing accidental about her choices. She is assessing Jon with the specific attention of someone inventorying what remains in their position, and discovering the inventory is shorter than they believed. At Joffrey's left, Tywin Lannister. He arrived from the south 3 hours ago, having ridden hard when the reports of Dornish encirclement and the Tyrell withdrawal and Jaime's capture stopped being individually manageable and became collectively conclusive. He is composed in the way that Tywin Lannister is always composed, the composure of a man for whom calculation is so constant it registers as stillness. He looks at Jon, then at Arthur Dayne in the doorway, then at Barristan Selmy, then back at Jon. Jon speaks first in High Valyrian, the language of Valyria, the language of the dynasty whose swords were melted into the seat behind Joffrey, the language Barristan taught him because what you open with is a declaration of what you believe yourself to be. He says what needs to be said in the old tongue, and then in common tongue for everyone in the room who needs the translation, I am Aegon of House Targaryen, the 6th of his name, son of Rhaegar, son of Lyanna. He holds the silence for one beat. come down from that chair. The throne room does not make a sound. Tywin Lannister is calculating. This is visible to anyone who has spent enough time studying what a face does when the mind behind it is working. The infinitesimal adjustments, the very slight stillness that is not calm but is concentration. He is running the numbers on what is standing in front of him. The army outside the walls, the Dornish at the harbor, the Tyrell withdrawal, Jaime in chains somewhere below, and this young man at the base of the Iron Throne with the two most recognizable ghosts in Westeros standing behind him. Tywin Lannister has never been in a room where the numbers did not eventually resolve to his advantage. He is in one now. He has not yet decided what to do about that. The moment holds, suspended over everything that is about to happen next. The Red Keep, King's Landing, continuous. The frozen moment in the throne room breaks the way most things break under sufficient pressure. Not with drama, but with the quiet sound of a decision completing itself. Tywin Lannister speaks. "We could fight," he says, addressed to no one in particular, and everyone in the room simultaneously, the flat assessment of a man who has spent 50 years treating violence as a tool to be picked up or set down based on what the situation requires. From the doorway, Arthur Dayne says, "Yes." One word, pleasantly delivered, with the specific quality of someone confirming a logistical detail rather than issuing a threat. The word carries the full weight of what it would mean for anyone in this room to attempt what Tywin has just described. Tywin looks at Dayne, at Selmy, at the young man at the base of the steps. He reaches to his belt and removes his sword, unhurried, using the ring and not the grip, and sets it on the floor of the throne room. The sound it makes on the stone is small and entirely final. This is not emotional surrender. Tywin Lannister does not capitulate emotionally. This is calculation arriving at its conclusion. The new king will need someone who understands how the realm actually functions from the inside. And the man who knows that best is currently setting his sword on the floor, with the composure of someone who fully intends to be useful to whoever administers things next. He folds his hands. He waits. Sandor Clegane has been standing 4 feet from Joffrey, where he has stood every time Joffrey required something between himself and consequences. He has been looking across the throne room at Jon since Jon walked through the doors. He looks at Joffrey, he looks at Jon. Something settles in his scarred face. Not resolution exactly. The ending of a question he has been carrying longer than it deserved. He sheathes his sword. He walks to the side wall of the throne room and stops. He does not kneel. He does not fight. He does not kneel. He simply removes his service from the situation entirely, the way a man removes himself from an argument he was never personally invested in. Jon registers the distinction immediately because it is a meaningful one. A man who refuses your authority but also declines to oppose it is not your enemy. He is a man with remaining dignity, which Jon understands the value of. No one moves to stop the hound. Meryn Trant takes 2 steps forward from the Kingsguard line, hand going to his hilt, the reflex of a man whose professional identity is defined entirely by which side of a transition he lands on, currently miscalculating which side that is. Arthur Dayne is at his shoulder before the 2 steps finish. Dawn is still wrapped in oilcloth on his back. It does not need to be drawn. Dayne touches the wrapped hilt lightly to the back of Trant's knee. Not a blow, a suggestion about the available options. "Sir Meryn," Dayne says, "you were better as a page." Trant kneels. Joffrey Baratheon opens his mouth. What comes out is the speech of a boy who has never once been refused anything, who has no experiential framework for a face that is looking at him without any of the usual deferences. He calls Jon a fraud. He calls Dayne a ghost, and Selmy a traitor, and the entire situation a fabrication that will be answered for before the week is out. His voice starts controlled and moves towards something that is not quite the fury it is trying to be. It is the sound of a person discovering for the first time that authority is not inherent but participating. And the room has stopped participating. He appeals to his mother. Cersei has not moved and has not spoken. She is looking at Arthur Dayne with the attention of a woman completing a specific calculation. If the Tower of Joy story was false, then everything constructed on the Tower of Joy story is false. The young man at the base of the steps is not a fraud. She does not speak. Joffrey appeals to his grandfather. Tywin's sword is on the floor. Joffrey reaches for his own sword. Barristan Selmy has moved across the throne room without anyone observing him do it, which is the achievement of 40 years of positioning himself between kings and consequences. He is at Joffrey's side with one hand on Joffrey's wrist before the blade clears 2 inches of scabbard. Don't. Quietly, One word from a man who has stopped a great many things in his life and is entirely at ease stopping this one. Joffrey does not. Jon stands at the base of the Iron Throne steps and does not sit. He has considered this, the image of it, the new king taking possession of the seat in the moment of maximum theatricality, and set it aside. The throne is a thing to be assumed when the realm has had time to understand what it means, not seized from a 16-year-old in front of a traumatized court. He will stand, he will deal with what is in front of him. That is sufficient for tonight. He looks at Tywin Lannister first. You served 3 kings, Jon says, and made each reign worse for your service. You will be tried for the murders of Elia Martell and her children, who were killed in this city in this keep on the day your army entered it, under your command. Until that trial concludes, you are under arrest. He holds Tywin's gaze. Your cooperation with the administration during the interim will be noted at sentencing. Tywin Lannister, who has looked at death twice and found it less concerning than instability, nods once. He does not speak. He is already thinking about the trial, its structure, its cost, what it will and won't take from him. He is already working. This is what Tywin Lannister does with adverse circumstances. He inhabits them. Jon looks at Cersei. You conspired to place a false king on the Iron Throne and sustained a fraudulent succession for 17 years, endangering the realm's stability and the lives of everyone whose fates depended on a lie remaining intact. You will answer to a properly constituted small council for the full accounting of those decisions. He pauses and then, your children, those who are genuinely yours, will not be harmed. He holds her gaze when he says the last part. He means both the sentence and the specific word in it. Yours. Not the realm's, not Robert's legacy. The children she bore, whatever the circumstances that produced them, are not responsible for what their parents arranged, and they will not be punished for it. Cersei understands exactly what he means. Her expression does not change. But something in the absolute rigidity of how she has been standing shifts, barely visible by fractions, toward a woman who has been handed something unexpected and is determining quietly what it will cost her to accept it. She says nothing. Jon looks at Joffrey. He is quiet for a moment, just looking. At the gilded armor made for a grown man and adjusted inadequately for a boy, at the face that is Cersei's face, in the masculine at 16, trying to arrange itself into something it was told it should be. This is the boy who signed Ned Stark's death warrant with the confidence of someone who had never once experienced a consequence. This is also a boy of 16, who was handed a crown and told it was his by nature and right and the force of every lesson he had ever been given, and who had no reason to believe otherwise. Jon has thought carefully about what happens in this room tonight and what it means for what comes after. He has thought about summary execution, the cleanness of it, the finality, and about what it would make him in the eyes of the realm to begin his rule that way, about what it would make him in his own accounting. He knows what he will not be. Joffrey Baratheon, Jon says, you ordered the execution of a lord of the realm without trial, legal process, or lawful authority. You are not a king, you are a 16-year-old boy who was told he was one. A pause. That is not your fault. The order is, you will answer for it. He looks at Cersei. House arrest, not the cells. He remains with his mother. She is responsible for his conduct going forward. Joffrey opens his mouth. That's finished, Jon says. 2 words, without heat, with the quality of something already decided that does not require the room's input. Joffrey closes his mouth. Ned Stark is carried in on a litter because his legs have not had sufficient use to trust over this distance, and because Arthur made the practical determination in the tunnels that dignity and necessity are not in conflict here. He insists on standing after 30 seconds. He stands. He takes in the throne room with the methodical attention of a man whose capacity to observe has not been diminished by weeks in the dark, just held in reserve, Tywin under guard, Joffrey's sword on the stone floor, Cersei silent by the throne steps, Sandor Clegane at the side wall, declining to be categorized, Barristan in position by the throne that is no longer Joffrey's, on the correct side of it now, Jon at the base of the steps with the 3-headed dragon on his chest and the dark blade at his hip. He looks at all of this for a long time. Did you plan all of this? He says. Not an accusation. A genuine question from a man who raised someone for 17 years and is now looking at what that someone became and trying to map the distance between the beginning and here. Selmy taught me to plan, Jon says. Dayne taught me to execute. He holds Ned's gaze. You taught me, through 17 years of silence, that some promises are worth more than kingdoms. Ned is quiet. He looks at Jon with the full attention of a man examining something he watched from its beginning and has not quite made peace with it being finished. He looks at Arthur Dayne. 17 years of things between those two men that were never spoken because there was never a moment where speaking them was possible. Arthur Dayne, who fought Ned Stark in the desert for the right to carry a child east. Arthur Dayne, who raised that child while Ned carried the story north and raised the lie in its place. Two men who built the same thing from opposite ends and have not shared a room since the sand and torchlight of the Red Mountains. She loved him, Ned, Arthur says. She chose it. She chose all of it. He means Rhaegar. He means Lyanna. He means the choice that cost everything and produced the young man who is currently standing at the base of the Iron Throne, having just told the Lannister dynasty that its era is concluded. Ned nods. Once, with the completeness of a man receiving the one piece of information he has needed for 17 years to close something that has been open the entire time. That is all that needs to be said. That is sufficient. The throne room empties in the way of rooms where something enormous has just finished. People finding their exits without visibly wanting to hurry toward them. Guards take Tywin. Cersei takes Joffrey's arm with the composure of a woman who has been defeated and has decided to conduct it properly, which is perhaps the most Lannister thing she has ever done. The Hound leaves last of the non-essential parties, walking past Jon without looking at him, which is itself an acknowledgement of a kind Jon accepts. Jon stands in the quiet of the empty room. He walks to the throne. At close range, it is exactly as hideous as it appeared from the base of the steps, more so in the specific way that things are always more so at close range than at a distance. The swords of kings defeated in the conquest, gathered by Aegon the Dragonlord at the founding of the dynasty and melted in Balerion's fire, standing for 300 years in this room as a monument to what swords ultimately decide. Blade edges at every angle. Old darkness in the metal between them. It was not designed to be comfortable. It was designed to remind whoever sat in it of what it cost to sit there. Jon touches one of the protruding blades. The edge opens a thin line across his fingertip. He looks at the blood. Small, precise, the throne taking the measure of him in the only way it knows. Arthur Dayne comes to stand at his shoulder without a sound, because Arthur Dayne has never made a sound he didn't specifically decide to make. Is it what you expected? Arthur says. Jon looks at the throne, at the blades, at the old dark between them. It looks like exactly what it is, Jon says. All the swords of conquest, melted together so no one can ever hold them again. A throne built from suffering. Arthur looks at it, and yet, Jon does not look away from the iron and the dark. Someone has to sit it. He turns. He walks the length of the throne room toward the doors, past the torches, past the empty space where Tywin's sword lay, past the wall where the Hound stood and declined to choose, and he does not look back. Behind him, the Iron Throne sits empty in the dying torchlight, patient in the way that old and ugly things are patient. Outside, Barristan Selmy is waiting with the night watch and the work that starts at dawn. Jon walks out and does not stop. King's Landing and the North. Several weeks later. Several weeks pass in the way that weeks after an ending pass. Not with rest, but with the work of converting a conclusion into a beginning. The great sept of Baelor holds more people than it was designed for on the morning of the coronation. They overflow from the nave into the side chapels, onto the steps outside where the small folk have been gathering since before dawn, a city that has spent 3 weeks recalibrating its understanding of who it belongs to and has arrived, cautiously, at something resembling acceptance. Black and silver draping covers every surface the preparation crews could reach. When gold was suggested during the planning, Jon said simply that gold was a Lannister color, and he had no interest in beginning anything draped in the aesthetics of the previous administration. The crown is black iron, newly commissioned from the city's best smith at Jon's specific direction. A silver direwolf head at the front, a 3-headed dragon at the back. The 2 houses that produced this king stated plainly in metal, without apology for either inheritance. When it settles on his head, the weight is different from what he anticipated. Heavier and more specific. Not the weight of authority as an abstract concept, but the weight of what authority means in daily practice. Every decision that will need to be made, every lord who will require a king's attention, every life now conducted under the shadow of whatever choices follow from this morning. He has thought about this weight his entire life. He finds he was not entirely prepared for it. In the front seats, Robb Stark, smiling with the quiet pride of a man present for the beginning of something he believes in. Lord Wyman Manderley, who has entirely forgotten his gout and is weeping openly without any apparent concern for who observes this. Lady Olenna Tyrell, who appears to be examining a spot on the ceiling with critical attention, which is her version of moved. Oberyn Martell, representing Doran's formal acknowledgement of the new order. Oberyn, who wept openly in the Red Keep's courtyard 3 weeks ago, when Arthur Dayne walked into the light alive, a story that has circulated through every corridor in the city and shows no sign of stopping. And at the end of the front row, quiet, present for this occasion and no other, Howland Reed, Lord of Greywater Watch, the only other living man who stood in the desert of the Red Mountains and knows what he witnessed there. He catches Jon's eye once across the crowd. He nods. Jon nods back. That is sufficient. The appointments come after the crown. When Jon announces Arthur Dayne as Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, the sept produces a sound that is the nearest thing to a roar that a religious space has generated in living memory. Arthur walks to the front without hurrying. He kneels, precisely with the deliberateness of a man who has been waiting 17 years to perform this specific act correctly, before the appropriate king, with full understanding of every word the oath contains. Jon pins the white cloak himself. Arthur rises. The sept does it again. Barristan Selmy argues when his appointment as hand is announced. Privately, before the formal declaration, I am old. I prefer a sword. There are others better suited to the political architecture of. I need someone better than me at something, Jon says. You are better than me at keeping kings honest. No one alive is better than me at the sword, which makes that post redundant for you specifically. Take the pin, Ser Barristan. Barristan Selmy takes the pin. He is, underneath the objection, a man who needed the reason more than the position, and the reason has been provided. Ned Stark is standing on his own when his appointment as Warden of the North is read. He has been standing on his own for 4 days, incrementally reclaiming the body that 5 weeks in the dark had partially reclaimed from him. He is still pale. He is thinner than he should be. He is standing, which is the point. When the formal decree concludes, Ned says, Your Grace, I was only ever a man trying to keep his word. Jon looks at his uncle, at the man who carried the secret for 17 years and never bent under it, who sacrificed the most essential thing a man of his character possesses, and who is standing here because of what that cost him and what it produced. That's the only kind of man I want serving the realm. Robb's appointment is different. Jon speaks with him privately first, tells him everything, the full account with nothing softened. The long night, the Night King, the army of the dead, the wall and what it means and what it will mean if it proves insufficient. Robb is 18 years old and has just marched an army across a continent. He does not require softening. He listens without interrupting. When Jon finishes, Robb asks one question. How many men? Every sword we can find, Jon says. Robb nods once. Then, I need to start building. He is announced as Master of War. The Northern Lords and the Sept understand exactly what their Lord's son has just been handed. They look at each other with the expressions of people who have been told the true size of what is coming and have individually decided, without consulting each other, that they would rather know than not. Jon addresses the assembled lords before the ceremony closes. He does not discuss the Lannisters. He does not discuss the political settlement or the alliance architecture or the succession framework or any of the things that inaugural addresses traditionally cover. He tells them what is actually coming: the Long Night, the White Walkers, an army of the dead that makes every force assembled in the recent war look like a preliminary exercise. The wall, 700 feet of ancient ice, built by people who understood with absolute precision what they were keeping out of the world and built accordingly. What the wall will need from the realm to hold when the time comes. The sept is silent through all of it. When Jon finishes, the silence holds for long enough to confirm that everyone present is processing something real rather than ceremonial. The great Jon Umber, who has been sitting with his enormous arms folded and an expression of the deepest and most particular thoughtfulness, unfolds his arms. He looks at the ceiling. He looks at Jon. Well, the great Jon says, I suppose we weren't going to get bored. The laughter starts at the northern benches and moves south through the sept, genuine and rolling and warm, the specific laughter of people who have just been given the gift of knowing that everyone else in the room is afraid of the same thing and intends to face it together. It fills the great sept of Baelor from the front nave to the upper galleries. It is the right note. Jon had not planned it. He will remember the great Jon for it for the rest of his life. The weeks that follow establish the shape of the order. Tywin Lannister remains imprisoned pending trial for the murders of Elia Martell and her children. Jon will not rush it. He wants the realm stable enough to watch justice done without the watching causing its own instability. Oberyn Martell, who has taken up residence in King's Landing as Dorne's informal ambassador with what can only be described as aggressive enthusiasm, asks about the trial with regularity. "When does it begin?" he says. "One morning over the council chamber map table, when the realm is ready to watch without flinching," Jon says. Oberyn considers this for a moment. "I am a patient man," he says. Cersei remains in the Red Keep with her children, pending the small council's full accounting of 17 years of fraudulent succession. She has said nothing publicly since the throne room. Jon does not underestimate her capacity to build things from diminished positions. He watches. Joffrey is under house arrest, in his mother's custody, in the process of learning what it means to be a 16-year-old boy in a city that has moved past believing he matters. Time and powerlessness are doing the work Jon assigned to them. Jaime Lannister has been released to attend his father's trial as a witness. Jon needs his testimony about the sack of 283 AC, and Jaime has no sword arm to complicate matters. He has been observed in various Red Keep corridors looking, for the first time in his adult life, genuinely uncertain about where to stand in any given room. The Lannister rank and file are pardoned. They followed orders. The officers who gave those orders will answer for them separately. Ned leaves for Winterfell on a morning that is finally committed to being cold in the way that autumn is supposed to be cold. Clear, specific, without drama. Jon walks him to the outer gate. "We will see each other at Winterfell," Jon says. "That is my vow." Ned looks at him, his sister's son, the secret that cost him 17 years of his wife's full trust and his own self-accounting. The king. He looks at him the way a man looks at something he made a promise about a very long time ago, that has arrived at its completion and is larger than the promise anticipated. He says nothing. He mounts. He rides north through the gate without ceremony. He does not look back, because he is Ned Stark and looking back is not how he is made. But somewhere on the King's Road, in the particular quiet that belongs to a man alone with a horse and a long road home, he arrives at the end of a thought he has been working toward across 17 years. She chose well, Ned thinks. She always did. Dawn on the roof of the Red Keep, Jon stands at the battlement's edge without his crown, which he left on the council table inside, because the crown has its place, and this is not it. Below him, King's Landing assembles itself into another morning. Smoke of 100,000 chimneys, the harbor visible in the blue distance, the sound of a city conducting its business under a king it is still in the process of deciding what it thinks of. Arthur Dayne appears at his shoulder. He always will. This is what Arthur Dayne has become. Jon's shadow, Jon's certainty that whatever approaches from behind is accounted for. It is not a role he was given. It is simply what he is. "You're thinking about the wall," Arthur says. "I'm always thinking about the wall," Jon says. Arthur nods. He looks north with Jon at the horizon, at the whole gray breadth of the continent laid open in the morning light, at everything north of here that he cannot see from this battlement. "She would have hated it," Jon says after a moment. "All of this, the sept, the crown, the lords and their expectations. Your mother," Arthur says, "she wanted to ride. She didn't want to be a queen. She just wanted to ride and be faster than anyone expected her to be." He is quiet for a moment. "Barristan told me that. He saw her once at a tournament. He said she rode like she was furious at the horse for not going fast enough." "You have her stubbornness," Arthur says, "and your father's certainty, his belief that there was a purpose to it all, a reason the long night comes at this particular moment in history, this specific convergence of things." He pauses. "He used to say the dragon has 3 heads. I never fully understood what he meant. Now I wonder." Jon looks at the northern horizon, at the gray line where his imagination places the wall, at everything beyond it that he has been prepared for and cannot yet see. 3 heads, Jon says quietly, 3 heads of the dragon. Below them, King's Landing is fully awake. The noise of it rises in the cold air, commerce and argument and the specific vitality of a city that has survived what it survived, and chosen, pragmatically, to continue. Inside the Red Keep, the new small council is meeting about supply shipments to Castle Black, and Robb Stark is writing letters to every northern house about what needs to be built, and Barristan Selmy is reviewing the first honest accounting of the realm's debts in 20 years. Jon's hand rests on the stone of the battlement. His gray eyes are on the northern horizon, not afraid, not at peace. Something else, the quality of a man who has understood exactly what is coming, has spent his entire life in preparation for it, and finds himself this morning for the first time ready in every way that the word can mean. far beyond the wall, far beyond where any eye from any tower in any city can reach. Something ancient moves through the dark of the frozen forest. Something that has been patient for 8,000 years and has no concept of impatience. Something blue and cold and entirely without mercy, older than the kingdoms that built the wall, older than the men who understood why the wall needed building, older than the names of things. It is moving. It has been moving for some time. Jon's hand tightens on the stone. "Let them come," he says. The sun rises fully over King's Landing. The harbor catches the light in 1,000 small reflections. The city is loud and warm and alive below him. All of it now his, for better or worse, for the span of whatever the world allows. And far in the north, in the darkness beyond the darkness that any living eye can find, the blue light moves through the trees. Patient, ancient, coming. Let us know what you'd like to see next. The end.